Artificial intelligence is hitting its first real bottleneck. Not algorithms, not architecture. Physics. The chips are too hot, the data centers are too expensive, and the energy demands are now at the edge of what national grids can handle. That's why every major power is starting to look upward. Because the only place left to scale AI may be space. Space flips the constraints of Earth. On the ground, heat is the enemy. Every extra computation raises the temperature and the cooling bill. In orbit, you get microgravity, vacuum conditions, and thermal extremes that silicon absolutely loves. Hardware performs better, not because it's new, but because physics stops fighting it. Cold vacuum means you can dump heat straight into space through radiators instead of evaporating water or running industrial chillers. That's why engineers talk about orbital compute as the first time cooling stops being the limiting factor. A model that needs 5 megawatts to run on Earth might need half that in orbit. Then, there is the energy problem. We already know the next wave of AI needs power on the scale of small nations. The US grid operators are warning about it. China is rationing electricity for data centers. Space sidesteps all of this. Solar intensity is stronger above the atmosphere and constant. No clouds, no weather, no night. A satellite can collect more energy in a day than the same panel on Earth collects in a week. This opens the door to orbital data farms. Not racks in a shed with air conditioning, but modular clusters the size of shipping containers, running edge models at full blast while the Earth spins beneath them. They beam down the distilled output rather than terabytes of raw data. This is where geopolitics enters the picture. Whoever controls orbital compute controls real-time Earth intelligence. Weather, crop yields, shipping lanes, missile launches, ocean temperatures, and global traffic flows. Countries used to fight over trade routes and shipping straits. The next strategic choke point is low Earth orbit. Autonomous satellites are the first step. Instead of snapping photos and sending them back for processing, they identify events the moment they happen. A wildfire in California, a flood in Bangladesh, a missile leaving a silo. The AI in orbit interprets the scene before any human even knows something is happening. The latency advantage is brutal. A few seconds becomes the difference between reacting and being too late. Now extend that logic outwards. Deep space missions need independence. You can't wait 20 minutes for a signal to go to Mars and back before the rover takes one step. Put an AGI-level system on board, and your spacecraft becomes a self-steering, self-repairing, self-analyzing explorer that can change course on its own initiative. That's why NASA and ESA are already testing autonomous nav systems that fuse star tracking, terrain mapping, and onboard neural inference. But the real disruption comes from manufacturing. Microgravity lets you build structures that collapse under their own weight on Earth. Zero sedimentation means you can grow crystals and fiber optics with perfect clarity. Laser sintering in vacuum produces alloys that are impossible under atmospheric pressure. These materials are not for rockets. They are for chips. Space may be the only place left where we can fabricate the next generation of AI hardware. This triggers a loop. Better materials produce better chips. Better chips produce better AI. Better AI designs even better factories in orbit. At some point, you get a runaway industrial chain where Earth's role is simply to supply labor and launch capacity, while all meaningful computation and manufacturing happens off-planet. Which leads to the uncomfortable question: what happens when the majority of the world's computation no longer happens on Earth? When the most powerful intelligence we've ever built is orbiting above us, with its own energy source, its own manufacturing line, and no physical dependence on the planet below. We started by asking how AI might operate in space. But the real story is what happens when space becomes the only environment where AI makes sense to operate at all. If you want to support the channel, check out the Future Forge merch and join the Patreon for early access, behind-the-scenes research and the full deep dives. And if you're new here, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.